Welcome, everyone, to the second in our workshop series, MBE Growth Strategies That Work. This would not have been possible without the collaboration and support of three wonderful organizations, and I need to acknowledge them. First is Peter Hurst from the Greater New England Minority Supply Development Council. Thank you, Peter. Dr. Mustafa Aloui from Quinnipiac University School of Business. And our host for this event, the lab at Concord, represented today by our President Phil Buer and our Vice President Paul McCraven. So thank you all so much for your support of this initiative. We gather today as business owners, as advisors and leaders, exploring what I think are the most powerful and oftentimes overlooked pathway to growth for MBE firms, acquisitions. One of Connecticut's fastest growing companies is located in Wallingford, Connecticut. His name is Amphenol. They make interconnect products. And 5 years ago, Amphenol's revenues were approximately $8 billion. Today, 5 years later, their revenues approach $16 billion. What has fueled that phenomenal growth? Acquisitions. Over the last 5 years, they've done 13 acquisitions. So across all companies like Amphenol, scale quickly, builds capacity, gains market share, creates enormous wealth for shareholders. That's what acquisitions do. What makes this conversation we're having tonight vital is that acquisitions aren't reserved for just Fortune 500 companies like Amphenol. They're a tool that we as MBEs can and should use. At our critical workshop that we launched this series, we had Taurus Richardson with us. Taurus is the founder of IMB Partners, a black-owned private equity firm who has built a portfolio of companies with annual revenues eclipsing $1 billion. And I hope you all know the story of my most significant and impactful role model, Reginald Lewis, an entrepreneur who back in 1987 leveraged all that he'd learned as a corporate lawyer to pull off an astounding feat by acquiring the international food business from Beatrice Foods, forming TLC, Beatrice International, the first black-owned billion-dollar business in America. He succeeded by having a vision and the courage to even attempt to do it. He mastered the art of building relationships that matter. He understood how to structure deals, and he became expertly familiar with how various types of debt financing work. And he knew how to manage a complex business organization. Too often, MBEs are told to grow slowly, organically, one customer at a time. Though that may be a worthy pathway, by growing your business is not the only pathway. Whether it's acquiring a competitor to expand market share, or purchasing a supplier to strengthen your supply chain, or merging with a peer to increase capacity for larger contracts. Acquisitions allow us to skip years of incremental growth and positions our businesses for long-term growth and sustainability. Let's be clear. Engaging in acquisitions is not an easy undertaking. It requires courage, it requires knowledge, it requires preparation, it requires thinking differently about capital, about partnerships, and most importantly, requires thinking differently about risk. That's why today's workshop matters. You'll hear directly from our panel of experts about real strategies, proven lessons, and practical insights that we hope will demystify the acquisitions process, and that you leave here better understanding how to evaluate opportunities and execute deals that will work. Let's have our panelists introduce themselves, starting my immediate left to my friend Aga.
Carlton, thanks again for the invite. I'm really excited for the conversation. My name is Aga Morgan. Can you guys all hear me all right? Excellent. I run the commercial banking healthcare focused business at KeyBank. I've been at KeyBank for about 15 years or so. We are a full service investment bank, commercial bank, and consumer bank, 200 years in service, 200 billion in assets. On that investment banking side, buy side, advisory, sell side advisory, across a wide variety of industries. Obviously, I'm focused on the finance end for healthcare. Personally, I live down in Weston, Connecticut. Spend most of my time in airports, traveling all over the country to advise businesses as to how they think about financing acquisitions. Carlton's been a mentor of mine for years and years, and look forward to being additive to the conversation.
Hi everyone. Again, thanks for inviting me here. My name is Charles Yoon. I am a partner at a private equity firm called Brightstar Capital Partners. Brightstar Capital Partners, we only invest and partner with founder-owned businesses like you all. And one of the functions we do when we buy and partner is to help with acquisitions. A lot of the entrepreneurs have grown the business a certain way. We would come in, we do not buy the entire business. We invest and partner with them. And a lot of times we are the acquisition engine because we know how to do it. So we help these businesses to acquire their competitors. They're either vertically integrate or expand market. And so we will become their acquisition arm after we invest in their business. And it's not easy, but it is a great way to transform and really take market share as well as strengthen the position of the business. And so I run the lower middle market fund. So we've got two different funds, one for very big businesses that have revenue from 200 million to 2 billion. I focus on investing behind founders who have revenue from 30 million to 200 million.
Hi, I'm Michael Carter. I'm a founder and managing partner of Carter Morrison Goodrich. We represent companies when they're ready to sell their business and when they're ready to raise capital. These are founder-based companies or families. I always say my psychology degree is far more important than my finance degree. So I love doing it, love speaking to entrepreneurs like yourself. My other passion is teaching kids about innovation and entrepreneurship. Run a program called Push for Entrepreneurship, where all the money raised goes to low-income school districts and teaching them innovation. So if anyone's into push-ups, let me know afterwards, and I'll start recruiting. So it's a great event. It's November 8th.
Thanks. Thank you, Carlton. Hey, good evening. I appreciate the description as an expert. I feel like that's a little bit less qualified than that. I definitely bring the least experience of the panel to the table, but hopefully a little bit of a unique perspective. So I work for a company called Rijig. We are a marketplace for buying and selling small businesses. We play in what is, we say the lower middle market, but definitely the lower market, anywhere between $1 million of revenue and $20 million of revenue is really our sweet spot for the type of business that we help get bought and sold on our platform. And Rijig is designed to let buyers and sellers transact and engage in conversations without any third parties. So we're a little bit different in the way our model is set up. The idea is that we're trying to help empower sellers to be able to sell without having to use a third party, and at the same time let that natural interaction between buyers and sellers on the platform. I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more later on about how important that relationship building is in the buying and selling of these types of very small businesses. I've been with the company since the start, which was back in 2022, so we're a very young startup based out of San Francisco. Happy to talk about more as we get into it, but thank you all for coming tonight.
All right, thanks, buddy. I want to give the panelists a sense of the room. By show of hands, how many of you have executed at least one acquisition? Okay, thank you. By show of hands, how many of you are seriously considering an acquisition within the next few years? Okay, wonderful. And finally, how many of you aren't quite sure yet if acquisition is the right strategy for you? Okay, so it gives you a sense. Okay, we're going to walk you through the various stages that you should think about in considering an acquisition. And we'll start first with the psychology. I'm glad that Michael mentioned that, the psychology of entrepreneurs. Bobby, what's the biggest misconception entrepreneurs have about their readiness to buy another company?
It's a good question, and the answer, I think, applies both on the buy side as well as the sell side, and that coming to the table for a transaction, I think many folks don't quite understand just how much time and energy the process actually takes. Many of you in this room are running your own businesses, and to enter into that process to potentially buy another business, it takes so much time and energy and diverts your attention from your normal day-to-day, which is running your company. And I don't say that to scare folks, but the reality is that engaging in those conversations with prospective sellers, going through that process of making an offer and doing a substantial amount of due diligence on the company takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it's something that you need to be prepared for. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, maybe even 6 months of your time from that initial introduction to eventually acquiring whatever business you might be looking at. So just going in eyes wide open, understanding it's going to take a lot of energy from you or your team to get the deal done.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Aga, you've encountered lots of entrepreneurs around the country. What are the personal and professional attributes the ones who are successful have?
Yeah, no, I had some time to think about the question, and I'm really focused kind of on the qualitative aspects of that character. I've written down or jotted a couple down, so I apologize if I touch on my notes. But first and foremost is that passion, right? And what I mean by that is authentic passion for your business dream. Whatever your aspiration is, chase it with passion. Curiosity, right? For me, life is one big learning opportunity. Each conversation provides an opportunity to learn. I think carrying that curiosity, not just in your day-to-day, business cadence, but also as you're traversing the influence network around M&A is super important. Adaptability and staying nimble. Success is not linear. It's never A to B, right? There's always ebbs and flows, and an ability to adapt in those challenging times and adapt in those successful times, I think, is critical importance. Fourth attribute, embracing change, embracing challenge, which ties back to what I just said. Not just embracing it, but also learning from that change and from that challenge, and having vision and sticking to one's vision, I think, is critical. Humility is a big point that I've encountered around really successful entrepreneurs. What do I mean by humility? Accepting criticism, seeing failure as valuable, as an opportunity to learn, but also carrying a bit of a swagger. A healthy swagger is important. Right? We're all selling something to somebody, right? And a swagger, particularly in our economy here in the United States, is, I think, mission critical. Just a couple more. Collaborative thinking, team-focused thinking. We cannot do any of this alone. Accountability. Right? Do what you said you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. I think is critically important. And as I said, we're all selling something to somebody, and if you cannot effectively communicate that narrative, right, it's probably not gonna. You may not achieve goals. So, effective communication, good storytelling. I am in the business of good storytelling, right? From a finance end, consistency, and I think measured approach to building and constructing strategy is critical. And then lastly, grit, hustle, and determination. Without those things, it's very hard to be graceful in the tough times, right? And then, graceful in the good times, right? Hard to be courageous without grace.
Right. Thanks, Aga. Charlie, there's this phrase that people use a lot about emotional readiness to transact. Is there such a thing? If so, could you give us your sense as to what it means?
Yeah, I think it's just really adding to what he's said, right? He's covered a lot, so I'm not gonna repeat it. But I do think there's kind of two things when you're going to do an acquisition. One, you, with all this narrowing down, you're gonna have 2 full-time jobs. And you need to be ready for that, because you running your business is a full-time job. Doing an acquisition will be a full-time job. And, you need to be ready for that. That means literally you're working 24/7 for, call it 3 to 6 months, which is when normally how long it takes to do an acquisition, and are you ready for that? And the second thing, which is kind of adding there, is you gotta be emotionally ready. Something's gonna go wrong. And you need to be ready for and accept that, you know what, and let it go. And you gotta just, once the deal's done, deal's done. You're not gonna see all the problems until you own the business. You will miss things, and you own it, don't look back. Now you just gotta be about problem solving, what you're gonna discover, because something will go wrong. And so, a lot of times, why we exist is because entrepreneurs, they don't do this for a living, right? So we do. All we do is acquisitions all day long. So it's a lot of times we have an advantage when we're doing it, because we know what standard is and what could go wrong, and you just have pattern recognition. And so a lot of times getting the right advisors, as well as having partners like us come in, so that we do that second job for you. And sometimes that's one way to do the acquisitions, if you're like, I can't do this and run the business. So then make sure you have the resources to do it, or don't try.
Thanks, Charlie. Building on what Charlie said, Michael, is there a playbook to get this work done? So could you talk a little bit about it?
Let me, there's no the playbook, but there's, I'll just say, best practices. And I'm going to touch on 6 of them, but zero in on 2. One of the best practices, especially for people in this room, and you had a show of hands, is start small. Don't bet your company. And very often that's acquisition that's, wow, I can double the size of my company. That's a huge acquisition that could literally ruin your company. So we say start small. Also practice. There's nothing like practice. Practice is meet a lot of companies. And very often acquisitions are exciting and you fall in love with the first person. So, I would say the more you talk, the more you realize the differences between companies, and you'll become a lot more educated. So number 1 is experience. Number 2 is have a strategic rationale for the acquisition. A lot of people, when I say, well, why do you want to buy the company? I can double the company size. And I said, so what? It's double. So what? How does that help you? And the good buyers in the playbook, there's a strategic rationale. I'll give you a few examples. One, they have a customer base that all those salespeople in that company can sell my product, or vice versa. So they have a product line that will take us and jump us to a whole different level of pricing. They have technology that it would take us years to develop. They have a management team. My management team is aging. I now can get a whole bunch of youthful managers that would really supercharge my business. And by the way, it's not only what the target can do for you, but what you can do for the target. So that's what I'm talking about, strategic rationale. So those are, I'd say, the most important part of the playbook. The others that I put on here is having a good assessment of the company and the owner. Because very, very often when you're buying a company, you're really buying the owner. So the owner leaves, guess what? A lot of customers are going to be leaving. So make sure you distinguish between company ownership, the company value, and the owner's value. We're going to be talking about integration. Integration is how you integrate these 2 companies. The good buyers always start the integration in the beginning. And if they see a problem in the beginning, they'll walk away. If people aren't listening to them, so that's important. And then lastly, the quality of the due diligence. And the quality of the due diligence start with really understanding the numbers, having the right advisors, And one more thing that came to mind is integrity. When we're talking to someone and we catch them in a blatant lie, we usually walk away. And it's the best decisions we ever make. Because they're there on their best behavior. And if their best behavior is just shown in the first couple of meetings, walk away. So that would be a summary.
All right, thanks, Mike. This is open to anyone who wants to comment. You saw a lot of our entrepreneurs have not yet done that acquisition. They're thinking about it, they're getting ready for it. If there's a nugget you can give them on what the things they should think about today as they get ready to do that transaction, that deal, is there one bit of advice or counsel that you would want to offer them?
To me, it's what he said. 1 + 1 has to be 3. If you don't have a strategic rationale, and that it really is 1 + 1 is 3, not 2, don't do it if it's just going to be 2 businesses. And so I think there has to be a specific rationale, strategic rationale, a value add to it, because it's really hard. And it's only worth it. And by the way, it is worth it if you really can combine, be a better business. But again, I think just to get bigger, a lot of people, I'm going to do an acquisition because I want to get bigger. That's not a good reason. I think that having that rationale, always, you know exactly that 1 + 1 is going to be 3 in this case, I think is really important if you've never done it.
So one other thing perhaps to add is just making sure that your own house is in order, right? From a governance standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a capital structure standpoint, I think having your own house in order is mission critical. In addition to making sure that you've got a well thought out rationale and some path, I think, to execution.
If you just plant one seed, it would be, why do I need to buy it? Can I build it? And you should be looking at build versus buy. And a lot of people just say, I'm too impatient, but you could build it, maybe. And so look at those acquisitions as, it's a buy decision or a build decision. What would it take to build it?
I'll add 2 quick tactical things as well. The first one is that there are many different communities, including this one, where there are former business acquirers as part of that community. So it's never too early to start having conversations with those folks to learn about the pitfalls and success stories, and to ask them questions about what their acquisition process looked like, how they source their business, how they finance the acquisition. So those are conversations you could be having right now, even if you might not be thinking about acquiring a company for several years. If you're a little bit closer to starting that acquisition process, maybe within the next year, it's also never too early to start thinking about what we call it a deal team, might look like. Meaning the right third parties you're going to need at your side to get that deal done. So that's an M&A attorney. It doesn't make sense often to use your personal attorney for an M&A transaction. So starting to maybe get introductions to M&A attorneys, maybe to lenders, maybe to accountants. These are the early conversations you can start to be having so that the right people are in place around you when you do find that right business to move forward with.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, so you determined that you're emotionally ready to do a deal. You have sort of profiled the strategic fit of the company you want to buy. Michael, how do you go about sourcing? What are some recommendations for the audience on how you source companies to buy?
It's really tricky. And Bobby just told me that he's talking to Bobby, but what I would do is change your psychology to this approach. A lot of people go to, what I'll say, is brokers or people like that. I made the mistake of working in my business too long without working on it. And when you're what I would suggest is building relationships within your industry and really cultivating those relationships. One of you guys used an adjective I really liked about relationships, and I don't know what it was called, but and when you start talking to the industry and now starting becoming the chair of the industry committee or something like that, you start to see all the businesses in your industry and talk to them, and you really learn a lot. You also become trusted. And M&A is a lot about distrust and trust. So I would start building those relationships and being outward, and learning about those. Get to know the competitors and do it in a way that's genuine, but you're building a bond. And what I try to do is help all my competitors all the time. So there's always, you give and get type of approach. But once that bond gets developed, we have people who are hiring us and say, I want to sell to Aga. I've known him for 20 years. You can run your auction all you want, but I want to sell to him. And we're saying, okay, we're going to run an auction. He's not going to know it. They said, fine. And whatever he did to prepare that seller, they bonded and they trusted each other. And very often, people who are selling their business care about the company and their employees and customers more than maximizing the last dollar of the purchase price. And that's what you want as a buyer.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. You're in the finance space primarily. Can financiers, lenders be a source of deal recommendations?
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. In our business, I manage about healthcare business. I manage around 500 different clients, right? So across a wide variety of subverticals within healthcare. And so the odds that I bank a diagnostics and testing business that's looking for growth capital or a partner in a specific region are considerably higher, right? And so I think it goes to exactly what Michael was saying in terms of developing kind of that trusting relationship, and I can help amplify the voice or an attorney or another deal maker in the community, help amplify the voice of that interested buyer, because that communication stream is really two things, right? Inbound and outbound. Lastly, I'll say I really get paid to tell the KeyBank story to whomever will listen. So odds are I'm out probably talking to a ton of different types of private equity concerns, individual or privately held businesses that are always looking for partnership one way or the other.
There are several different kinds of acquirers, Charlie. Entrepreneurs like us who look to build legacy business through acquisitions. And then there are other acquirers like Horace Richardson, who was here with us last time, who builds portfolio companies in the private equity space. Is the sourcing different, from your perspective, for that legacy entrepreneur acquirer versus the private equity acquirer?
So I think I just echo what he's saying about, especially if it's your first, or even if it's your second, or even if it's your third. And if it's your 50th, you've done this enough that you can kind of just go try to acquire someone who you may not know. I don't think it matters. Sourcing is just hard, period. Right? It's hard no matter where you're going, but especially if it's an entrepreneur who is doing it for the first time or second time or third time, you should acquire someone you already know for a long time, right? Someone who you've already had a relationship that you've either competed with and shared knowledge with, or is a supplier of yours that you know. To do just completely, I don't know this person, but they seem like a good business, and I'm gonna go try to acquire that. That's a recipe for disaster, especially your first, second, especially the size of the business. Guys like us, we've done hundreds of, we can go and go find the things that are the skeletons in the closet. You got doing it for the first few times, you're not going to be able. So you need that trusted relationship, that someone that you've known for a long time. That's the first position, and that's how you should source. Not through brokers or just going around that's how you start, but build that relationship over time before you acquire.
Okay. Charlie, we give you the opportunity to, Bobby, to respond because he mentioned broker. What's your response to that? because essentially what you guys do is that, you bring buyers and sellers together.
Yeah.
When relationships don't exist.
Yeah.
What's the secret sauce to what you do?
It's a great question. So, I mean, but fundamentally what we're getting at here, right, is that there are two ways to source deals. There are what we'll call broker deals, where there is sell-side representation or a broker involved. And then there's off-market deals, where there is not that. Where we play, Rejig, is somewhere in the middle. So what we do is provide a platform for sellers to be able to show up without having a broker and be able to connect directly with buyers. So while we are a marketplace that connects buyers and sellers, the distinction is that the buyers and sellers are having conversations directly with each other, and we try to stay out of the way as much as possible. And I couldn't agree more with Charlie and Michael, and that the relationship piece, especially for small deals and probably many of the types of deals you'd be looking at, the relationship piece is just so critically important. Like the stuff is going to go wrong, like Charlie said, if you don't have that foundation of trust built with the seller. As soon as something goes wrong, it's really hard to salvage the deal. And the only way that trust can be built is by talking and meeting in person and actually having the negotiations and so forth. And that's what our platform tries to enable. But I think fundamentally I agree, especially at this size deal in the marketplace, that it's better to go the off-market or relationship-driven route for sourcing.
So it's very interesting, Michael, you say that your firm will be hired to sell a business, but relationships have intervened at some point where the seller is advising you to talk to Aga. That's interesting. What percentage of your transactions sort of turn out that way versus those ones which are open market bid?
Well, we run, I would say, an auction, sort of the broad auction, and just get us the best price. That's probably 75 to 80%. There's some that are, I'll just say, controlled auction, where I met Aga, Charlie, and Bobby. Those are the best three. Just go to those three. I don't want the whole market to know. Confidentiality is really important. But between the three of them, they'll probably come up with a number that I know. And then there's the one that, my first example, that probably represents 1 out of 10 to 20. And that's the one where I want to sell, in my example, Aga. And we sometimes will run a auction, but we're not really running an auction. Aga doesn't know it, but he's the only name in town. And what's amazing about this process is it's an extremely inefficient process. And what I mean by that is when we sell a business, we get bids from X to 2X. The first bidder bid X. They weren't lowballing it, but they just didn't see what 2X. So it's very, very inefficient, and those values are in. We'll touch base a little bit on valuation, but the values are all over the place. All four of us could bid on the same business and literally come up with double. One person would be double the other.
Before we move on, I'm going to turn to the audience. We've covered sort of mindset, we've covered deal sourcing. Is anything that our panelists say to you or said are things that you did not know? Things you've not thought about?
Everybody should be raising their hand. Come on.
It's a long laundry list.
So you give them some thought. So anything you disagree with? That's not been my experience. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a quick question. I'm just curious. What do you go about scouting out a company that you want to acquire?
What was the last?
How do you go about scouting out?
Scouting for companies.
Like actually finding the business you're
Yes.
talking about. So I'll speak to how our platform works, and then I would love to hear what they all have to say. But especially sourcing off-market deals, it can vary quite a bit. You might meet somebody at a trade show. How we source almost all of our deals on Rejig is through cold calling, believe it or not. So we are calling thousands of business owners every week, trying to find those who might be interested in selling their business, but who don't have a broker. And what we tell them is, instead of hiring a broker, come to our marketplace. We don't charge sellers anything, and they can meet with buyers. But I think getting to like the point of your question, I think Charlie made a point earlier that coming from the private equity space, they have a ton of experience, and he's absolutely right. Where I think that many of the folks in this room might have an edge is that many of you own businesses yourselves. You are very much ingrained in whatever industry you're operating in, and so leveraging that as much as possible in conversations with sellers is really powerful. So getting somebody on the phone who owns a business that is either a competitor or maybe some tangentially connected to your industry, you're going to have a huge leg up in that you can talk to them about your business and your experience, and there's so much to connect on that somebody in the private equity space might not necessarily have. But I'm rambling now, but the short answer is organic connections, cold calling, emails, reaching out through trade shows or other industry events, that sort of thing.
Just to build on that, so great question. I mean, for me, it boils down to networking, right? And that's not often a very natural muscle for people. But in that networking, each conversation being very deliberate and sort of goal-oriented, because what you're trying to do is tap into a deal-making space that might not always be super transparent. What assets are out there, who's transacting what, who's buying what. And to get to that place, you're gonna need to expand your circle of influence, pretty significantly, right? But again, it just boils down to networking is not supernatural for folks. You gotta practice.
We get ours, we love trade shows. So we go to the HVAC trade show, been there for years. All of a sudden this year, we're one of the keynote speakers. That's going to get a lot of publicity, so that would be terrific. The other thing I would say is to build on the networking, tell people that you're looking for an acquisition. And it's amazing where they are on the Little League field. All of a sudden says, you know what, Cynthia's looking for that. So get the word out, and it spreads.
I understand that an acquisition is like being in a marriage. So tell me a little bit about the integration. I mean, more than 50% of the acquisition.
We're gonna get to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get into you. I'm sorry.
Great question.
We looked at your are you ready mindset. We looked at sourcing it. Now we're gonna figure out a way to pay for it.
Right.
Your diligence, and then we'll get the integration.
Okay, thanks.
So hold that second. Hold it. Yes.
Earlier you stated that you should try to acquire a company that you know. So how do you go about knowing that they might be considering selling or even partnering or even creating a merger? Because I'm in that situation where we outsource just about everything that we do, and I need an operation side. It would be better to have folks that are already operating in operations versus teaching them or going through that growth pain. So how do you find folks that might be willing to either merge or be acquired? That you know? Like, how do you approach it?
Well, again, I think it's what everyone says. So how we source it, it's honestly you're asking. You're always asking everyone you meet in a specific. The good news is the sector you want, right? So you kind of have a sense of the companies that are out there because you might be using them or you've heard of them. And then it's like you said, it's uncomfortable for folks who don't do it for a living. But the idea is to go to them and say, hey, I think there's a strategic fit. Not sure if you're willing to sell. That's why it's a long-term game, right? We may be talking to folks. Well, we're doing an acquisition right now. We've been in conversation for 4 years. They didn't want to sell, right? The beauty of the United States, there's no forcing mechanism. And for us, we're willing to be patient. That's why you need to talk to a lot of folks. So on our side, we actually have a database of over 1,000 folks like Michael, where we would say, you know what, I'm interested in an HVAC business, or we own an HVAC business and we want to buy more. And we'll reach out to all of them. And so it kind of widens the network because he has all those networks. We have attorneys, M&A attorneys. We have financing sources. We keep the sales force of all of them. And when we say, you know what, right now we have a business in waste management services, we'll reach out to all of them and say, we are looking for an add-on, an acquisition. So I think for you is, again, it's not going to come just like this, right? You're going to approach it. Now they know you're interested. So it may be a few months from now or something happens and you're there for that situation. It's rarely that you're like, I want to do an acquisition and I'm going to do an acquisition for you. It's going to be months to years before it happens. So that's why it's good for you to do it now, because you prepare now. You start having these conversations now, but it'll be quite a long time because they need to be ready to sell.
And knowing your business model, because mine was very, very similar to what yours is, go to the trade shows they mentioned, right, where your suppliers are. Then whatever their industry trade shows are, go there. Be seen, be involved, talk to people, start building relationships.
You have an industry trade association in your industry? Yeah, to encourage that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, in the actual decision making as to yes, buy this company, what is the kind of weight you assign to the numbers, like the financial statement numbers and so on?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to transition to right now. Valuation. How do you know what to pay for a business, right? And we had lots of back and forth with this panel about valuation. Very, very complex. But I'm going to call upon Michael at a high level to talk about some examples of how he helps his clients determine value for a business, but it's very complex. In my old industry, it was a multiple of EBITDA. Everybody knew what the multiple was, depending upon what sector of the industry you serve. Michael?
So let me just take what Carl said. He said a multiple, that's a number, times EBITDA, which is cash flow. And coming up with the right cash flow is very, very important. All our transactions, we take the accountant's numbers, throw them out, and hire a quality of earnings firm. And the quality of earnings firms tells us what tells us the numbers that we're going to be counting on. So that number is number one. And number two is the multiple. We've sold businesses for 3 or 4 times, and we've sold them for 20 times. That's a huge number. What I'd like to do is just kind of walk through some of the variables of what's a 4 times and what's a 20 times. What we do is a business assessment, check out the people. People are very, very often, one person represents a lot of value in those companies. Customer relationships are very, very important. How long do they keep coming back year after year after year? You're churning through customers. The financials are very important, but it's just part of it's the half of my equation. The multiple is the other one. Momentum. A lot of companies where we talk to, and you can see, the owner was tired. He let the leaky roof keep. He keeps patching up the roof, and that roof is about to, to disintegrate. So you wanted to get a sense of where that company is in the growth term, and very often the numbers don't show until maybe a year or 2 after that neglect. Areas of improvement. You want to identify, companies throwing off $1 million in profits. What can I do to help the business? And if you can't help the business, you're probably not going to pay a high multiple. If you can say, wow, the next day I can double earnings, you're going to probably win that auction. So that would be another area. Ask why they're selling, and listen really carefully, and ask the question 3 times. You'll get 3 different answers, especially after some vodka. So that's I'd say confidence in the future. Those companies that sell for those high multiples, there's a lot of confidence in the future. So if you think about your security alarm company, okay, that company, they know exactly what their revenues are for the next 12 months. They sell for something like, forget the numbers now, something like 3 or 4 times sales. It turns out to be a number like 20 times earnings. A security guard company only sells for like 3 times earnings. That security alarm company, it's pretty hard to fire. They have to really screw up to be fired. Very, very steady business, fixed costs. The other one is total variable costs. People can leave, a lot of risk associated with it. So do a risk analysis. That's Warren Buffett's thing is, I'm the risk manager of those businesses. Find out how they think about risk. If they're cutting corners left and right, those are again going to be low multiple type of business. And the last thing I would say is look at the what I'll just call contingent liabilities. They very often have cut enough corners that they're not being sued by the customers, but if a buyer comes in with deeper pockets, all of a sudden, all bets are off. And so you want to make sure that that close relationship that company has with its customers can be absorbed by you. And if it can't, you could be inheriting a lot of problems. So.
Thanks, Michael. Charlie, can there be disagreement on what the value of that business is? And
There's always a disagreement.
So how do you reconcile?
So
the business?
I always want to pay less, they always want more. Every single time. There's never a situation where we're like, oh yeah, I'll take that. Again, I think usually this is where compromise and go. When both parties are kind of not that happy, you're probably at the right place. And again, it's all the work that they've done that he's talked about to figure out what's the value. And again, usually what you need to do, especially for you all when we're a strategic buyer, so we already have an asset and we're buying another one, is this value creation, the 1 + 1 is 3. You're gonna have to give a little bit of that extra 1 to the seller if the valuation isn't matching. And there's other tools that you can use. I don't love using it, but sometimes you have to, whether it's an earnout, so you get paid more. What if once we do the deal and the business does well, we'll pay you more. So there's earnouts that you can do. You can do cash and stock, right? Saying, all right, well, you think your business is worth 10 million, well, then we'll say our business is worth 50 million, same multiple, and we'll give you some stock in it. So there's tricks of the trade to get to a compromise. And this is why relationships matter. Both sides need to want to do the deal. Otherwise, you're gonna spend a whole lot of time and never get there, right? And so when there's trust, and like I said, the minute, because you'll find flaws and mistakes and liabilities on these, as long as it's not intentional, you can get there. And you can structure and be creative ways of doing this. This is why sometimes you do need an advisor. We can tell you about all the ways to bridge the gap between a buyer and a seller, difference in valuation. But the minute you find it's intentional, just walk, right? This is why, again, in the very beginning about that relationship building, why you need to talk to them for months and years and get to know them before doing a deal.
Right, thanks. Charlie, it's not to ask.
Sorry. So this issue of, and I think Michael also brought it up, the issue of, say, lying, whether intentional or unintentional, right? Do you apply some materiality threshold to it, right? Because assuming, let's say it shouldn't be intentional, I acknowledge that, but when you're looking at a business, right, you look at the core things that matter, right? Maybe the owner or the seller, right, you've done your due diligence about the things that matter, right? So let's say they throw in a car, right, as part of what you're buying, and they tell you the tires are new and all that, right? And I'm talking about like $10 million, $100 million business. Do you walk away, right? For those type of or do you have some materiality yardstick you use in evaluating whether it's intentional, whether it's intentional, that's whether they're telling a lie or it's just a business?
Yeah, you do materiality, because you're not gonna be able to diligence the whole business. It's no different really than buying a house, right? You're not gonna be able to look at every corner. There's might be cracks here, it's not perfect. You're looking at the major things. And then it's similar to buying a house. You're gonna have an advisor who's gonna help you do that. You're gonna have someone go, do a full walkthrough and look for what mistakes, major things, because there's no way in the period of time. You need to know that whoever's selling you the business will always know that business way better than you, because you're only going to spend a few months evaluating. And so you kind of price that in to the price, knowing that, look, there's going to be flaws, there's going to be things. A lot of times it's really not intentional. I'd like to believe that they're running a business. They're also busy, just like you guys, and they're not going to be able to know every little thing that's going on in their business. And so once you start with that relationship, you give the benefit, you get the big things right, and the little things. Again, this is why the 1 + 1 is 3. That extra 1 helps with all the little mistakes that you're going to find when you do that acquisition.
I just want to make sure, you used the example, $100 million business, and he said he had new tires and he has old tires. Okay, so let me just disagree with Charlie. If that happened, materiality would be out the window. If he lied about his tires, he's lying about a lot of things. We hear that once and we're out of there. And so there's no such thing as a little lie. I mean, so I understand what Charlie's saying, but we representing you, we're going to get caught because that person has lied many, many times, and he can lie about the age of his tires.
Yeah, I agree with that. If they are lying, they're lying to your face, you can't do it. What I'm saying is you're not going to be able to know, and he may not know all the things, like, I didn't know that there's a crack in the wall there.
That's different.
Right.
Your question was a good segue, though, to due diligence, which we want to cover on. Okay. Aga, should first-time buyers always hire professionals to conduct their due diligence?
Yes, period. For a couple of reasons, right? Well, in managing the due diligence process, we've had many examples, lots of conversation around that. 2, negotiating terms, like, right? A dispassionate advisor, I think, will be infinitely more effective in the negotiation process, and can help you maintain discipline to walk from the deal, right? And then lastly, yes, because an advisor can help you think through fair market price, right? We've talked about multiples, we've talked about valuation, but how the heck do you know if 7 times is market, or is it 23 times, right? I mean, who the heck knows, right? Advisors are paid good money to have a constant thumb on the pulse of valuation for a given sector. Right? A nuts and bolts manufacturer based on, financial analysis, what we might call discounted cash flow analysis, deal precedents, deals that have been struck in the last 2 years in the nuts and bolt manufacturing space, and perhaps there are other sort of publicly traded comps. That advisor gets paid good money to know all of that. You get paid good money to run your business.
To Aga's point, Charlie, can a purchase price change as a result of findings from due diligence?
Always. Exactly. Like, never be afraid to walk from a deal, never be afraid to, because that's the whole point of doing the diligence. Now, the little things you're gonna find, but anything that is material, you gotta reflect it on the price you pay for that business. And that's why you pay the advisors, that's why you do the due diligence. Again, you set a price a lot of times, before you finish diligence, because you don't want to do the work if the person wants, you think it's worth 10 million, he thinks it's worth 100 million, forget it, right? Let's not waste time. But you agree, but then a lot of times they'll say, we do $1 million of cash flow. And then you do the work, it's 700,000, well, the price has to change. There'll be hidden liabilities that you find. And you can either take the price down or say, that's your liability, that's your problem, we're not taking it. And this is where the advisor helps, because there's the structuring. You can do an asset deal versus a stock deal, which I know is probably going too deep, but that's one way of saying, I don't want these liabilities, we're gonna leave that with you. So, the whole purpose of diligence is to confirm the price. And when you find it, rarely do you will find positive, and you don't tell them and try to pay the same price. But yeah, unless you're very generous, because you will find sometimes actually they say they're making $1 million, and you do the work, actually they're making like $1.2 million. And rarely do you go tell them, oh, you're making $1 million, so we'll pay you more. But when it's below, that's the fair deal, right? That you need to get what they are representing when you say, here's what I want to pay for you.
How do you evaluate goodwill?
Again, the way all of us mostly do valuation, we're focused on the cash flow. Cash is king, right? So all goodwill, that's a GAAP accounting
Right, it is,
metric.
yes.
Doesn't matter. I don't give a crap about goodwill. And this is also, especially smaller businesses, right? Because you got to also look at CapEx. A lot of times they have things that are going to break. And we're like, well, you literally know you're going to sell, so you didn't upgrade anything. Right? Then you go, well, I'm going to take what you should have spent over the last year, I'm going to take that off the purchase price. Right? So it's really about cash flow and the kind of the quality of the assets and the quality of the people. Goodwill doesn't matter.
Let me just tweak what Charlie said. I gave the example of companies that sell for 4 times versus 8 times. To some degree, the reason you're paying 8 times is because of the, I'm air quoting now, not the gap, but because of the goodwill. The things that aren't on the balance sheet, the customer relationships, the technology, the people. So to some degree, it's not ignored, but it gets captured in the multiple that you want to pay for.
Okay, you've gone through due diligence. Purchase price is established. You now get to a closing, and most of us have closed on home. Bobby, what does a closing look like for a business?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so Charlie stole a little bit of thunder here. Look, the home buying process is a great corollary for the business buying process in that you begin with an initial courting, submitting an offer, which is, if accepted, kicks off a period of exclusivity where the buyer and seller are negotiating in good faith and only with each other. During that time, you're trying to secure financing for the transaction if you do not already have the capital already. In the same way that you might be trying to procure a mortgage to buy a house, you're probably going to be getting either a lender or other equity to purchase a business. And the closing looks fairly similar. It's a lot of paperwork. You obviously draft a formal purchase agreement ahead of that closing in the same way you draft a formal purchase agreement for a house. And at the closing table, all the money gets wired and everything gets transferred. Does that answer the question?
That answers the question. What is the must-have professional advisor perspective at a closing? You must have this professional. Charlie?
Yeah, I think you need a great attorney that knows how to do this. This isn't your personal injury attorney. This isn't your, mortgage attorney. You need an M&A attorney, because a lot of times there's tax structuring too, and there's a lot of structuring related to liabilities and how you. An agreement is just which liabilities am I going to take and which one you're going to keep. And so I think a good M&A attorney. We also having a good, call it quality of earnings. These are folks who go and say, what's the real cash flow of the business? So they're going deep into the numbers, into the general ledgers, just to make sure when they say, I make $1 million a year, they're going to confirm that you actually made $1 million a year. And there's a lot of adjustments because with founders, they might have a country club in there, they might have a kid that they're paying. They adjust all that, so you go, when I buy it and all that's gone, what's the cash flow of the business? I think those two are key advisors before you do those transactions.
Sorry, Chuck. So when you say if the business claims they're making $1 million, right? You want to be sure that they're making $1 million. Are you basing it on accrual revenue or cash revenue?
So this is where this QV advisors, at the end of the day, cash is king. Because a lot of times they don't accrue properly. And by the way, it's usually not intentional. Because the GAAP rules change all the time and they might be outdated, or revenue recognition can change. And so they just a lot of times don't do it the proper way, because most small businesses have never been audited. Right? You're likely not buying a business that's been fully audited, that does all of those things properly. So this is why this QVE will go in and just, most important, what they can't cheat is how much cash did they make, right? And at the end of the day, there's GAAP and accounting and related to it, but usually that's the most important thing for doing an acquisition. And so you try to, and they will do some of the accrual type of things that you're talking about, accrual and prepayment expenses, and they're also looking at CapEx, and which impacts cash flow, and working capital. So I think that's, at the end of the day, you're really trying to true up the cash.
Michael, do all deals result in 100% transfer of ownership and control at closing? If they don't, then what are circumstances or situations that would warrant that?
If you're the buyer, the seller, or both?
Both.
So what Colin is talking about is if you're buying a company, you think you're going to buy 100% of the company, but you may see the owner there is so critical to the business and want to get them vested in their success that you say, you know what, I'm going to buy 80% of your business, okay? And that 20%, if things work out and you're working as like you said you would behind me, he gets, in a sense, get what we call a second bite of the apple. That 20% could be worth more. It's a very complex way of structuring it. I don't get into the idea is you're keeping the ownership vested in the success of the company post-sale. And that is very, very important because there's a lot of intangibles. People, customer relationships, things like that. So buying, a lot of private equity firms will only buy, will insist upon the owner rolling over 10, 20% of the value of the company for that very reason. And it's I talked to one private equity firm, they did a big study, it was about 20 years, and they found out that their best performing transactions are when the owner rolled over, and I forget the number, it was something like 18% or more. Because if you're rolling over 18%, you must be pretty optimistic about the future. A lot of our owners say, I'll roll over 5%. I want to win 95% cash. And they're obviously being more cautious. So it's an intangible vote of confidence that gives private equity firms confidence that when I talked about the company peaking already, probably a lot of our owners say, listen, I've got the brightest future in the world. I want to own equity in this company. That's who you want to be buying.
I'll tell you, we're probably the extreme because we only buy from founders. We never buy more than 75. If they don't roll over at least 25, we walk.
So the same messaging. They were pretty confident if they only took 75 cents on the dollar.
Right. If they need to believe in the business, they need to have skin in the game, and we want alignment of interest. Because we'll never know that business better than they do. Just like I know how to do acquisition, I don't know their business. So when we're partnering with them, it's actually, our average has been probably in the high 30s. Because we sell them, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to partner, you're going to own 40, we'll own 60. Then we're going to put more money in to do acquisitions, and here's what this 40% could be worth. And so for those who believe, it's self-selection. Those who believe want to do it with us. And if they want to sell, 95%, we said there'll be other buyers, but that's not us.
Does anyone follow why? Because the rationale is really
skin in the game.
Skin in the game, alignment of interest.
Carlton, we do have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay? Wanna read them?
Yeah, sure. So the first question we have is, how easy or difficult is it for a small company, about $1 million in revenue, to get financing for an acquisition? And what will typically be required of the owner for the acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in. So it depends on like every variable you could possibly imagine. Ease or level of difficulty. But if it's me in that seat, I'm going back to some of the core characteristics that we've talked about. Make sure that your own house is in order, right? And I mean about, hygiene around your financial statements. Are they reviewed? Are you audited? Probably at that size of business, probably not. But think about discipline and sort of how you're tracking, your expenses and your inflows of revenue, et cetera. I think the other thing that's really important is getting out way ahead of the transaction, right? So if you have a personal banker at a branch, KeyBank branch today, advertising, just saying, if you do, you might want to start talking to that banker today about what you need to do to prepare for a financing. Lastly, you could also start researching the SBA process, which is obviously different than a bank like ours. Often the reporting requirements and due diligence for SBA are as rigorous and arduous as a bank, and it could take a whole lot longer. All that, I think, is under the umbrella. Make sure your house is in order.
Thank you. We just have one more. And I think this may have been a little bit answered earlier about the example of the person lying about their tires. So this question is, do you ever use rules of thumb to evaluate the worth of a business versus cash flow, versus just looking at cash flow?
There is, again, depending on the size of the business, and if there's an industry, this is where advisors there's two things that people look at, right? They're looking at public companies and what they're trading at as a multiple of PA. And then precedent transaction, as in all the transactions that's happened in the past couple of years in that specific industry, which is why he talked about, he always knew what he's gonna pay, because that industry, it's this for about this size of a business, it's something else if it's bigger. If it's growing at 10%, it's one thing. If it's growing at 3%, it's a different thing. So people do use rule of thumb, but you need the data. And that's where guys like these folks, as well as us, right, we have the data to be able to go, that one, it's about 5 times. And then you do the diligence and then you'll adjust. Where the seller wants 7, you say, well, let me do a lot of work, and you find out there's actually some great aspects of it, and you can move it. But you can kind of get a sense of what it should be sold for by looking at comparable transactions in that industry.
Thank you.
All right, I do want to transition to integration, because I think we all agree that that's perhaps the most critical of the entire process, most important of the process here. Charlie, why is integration so critical? Why is it important?
Yeah, I think, again, I talked about this, when you buy a business, that is the starting line. That is not the finish line. That is actually you just finished. That you just start, right? We don't actually buy, this is where the diligence period. Diligence is partially what am I going to pay for it, as in what's evaluating the business. But in that diligence, I'm already building out an integration plan because I'm learning about the business. And I have a 90-day plan before I ever close. And it's very checklist of things that's gonna happen in the first 90 days. Because if you're not, like, if it's 1 + 1 isn't 3, don't do the deal. So you better know the extra one you're getting, the cost synergies, the revenue synergies. You know exactly what you're going to do with this business, including whether bank accounts, you're gonna merge it or not, sales team, how's it merging, purchasing. You're talking hundreds of line items of every little thing you're going to do. We have it identified before we close, because when we close is literally the starting line, and we just launched and we're running for that mile, but we're just starting, right? So it's really important because it's also a way to learn about the business and how, about the people, right? Because you can't get financial statements unless you integrate it. So we at least try to integrate within the first 90 days so that you get all the benefits, right? Purchasing synergy, not buying phones from 2 different lines or cell phone, even those little things, because there's dollars everywhere. And you might as well capture them right now. And the most important reason why you integrate is information without knowledge of what you bought. You know, you just paid a lot of money for this, and the only way you're gonna really get to know that business is you've integrated and you're getting the data as soon as you can.
I'm gonna ask all of you the same question. I'll start with you, Bonnie. What's the most common mistake you've seen buyers make through an integration process?
It's a good question. I would say in virtually any deal of this size, the former owner of the business is going to be involved in a pretty intimate way post-close. And I think defining what that role post-close looks like is very important. A lot of people gloss over that. They're focused on the numbers and getting the cash, and that's all important too. But having a very firm understanding of what the former owner's role is going to be in running the day-to-day operations and participating in that transition process is hugely important. If they want to retire, wash their hands of it, and be in Barbados like 2 days later, that's going to be a problem if you're trying to learn some of the nuances of the business, get the new employees onboarded. Like it's a real challenge if you're not on the same page about that.
Michael, same question.
I would say, just to pick up on what Bobby said, it's people. It's people. Get an org chart and find out, who's valuable. And very often we make the mistake of, the top of the org chart is the most valuable people. And very, very often they are not the most valuable people, and everyone underneath knows that. And so I would say, making sure that you really understand who the keepers are and who the people that have to leave immediately thereafter, because they're toxic. They won't accept some of the changes that Charlie was talking about. So I would zero in on that.
Charlie?
I think that this is a people business. No matter what business, it's a people business. And this is done before you close. You need to talk to the folks who are actually on the ground doing the work, not the top folks. And you'll learn a lot. And you need to figure out roles. Compensation, because your compensation for your business may be different than the compensation, and the word gets out. So really focusing on the people side right after close and making sure you don't lose key people that setting all that up. We actually like to set it all up pre-close so that we know if we have a problem. If someone's like, I'm unhappy with that, you want to know before. So prior to close, having all the conversation about the people, what roles, what's the compensation, benefits, because a lot of people are like, is my benefits going to change, right? This is always a people business, so making sure that side is ready.
Okay.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think the biggest challenge that we see is over leveraging the newly formed or merged entity, meaning taking on way too much debt which is usually because you overpaid for it. Right? So it all goes full circle, back to your advisor, making sure that you've got discipline in the acquisition process. You're willing to walk away, you're gonna pay a fair market price, something that the newly formed entity can digest in terms of debt. Like banks, we really wanna be your partner. We're not there to put people immediately out of business. But yeah, the over leveraging piece, we just see it way too much.
Okay. A provocative question. Do MBEs face any unique challenges as they think about entering an M&A space?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's about diluting your MBE, or, putting your MBE status at threat, right? And so I don't necessarily know off the top of my head how the math works, but if you're buying something, if part of your business model is relying on your MBE status, you cannot go buy often a 100% sort of non-MBE related entity, right? That status at the state level and the federal level is of critical importance. So you want to make sure that you're doing that math as you're going down the due diligence process.
Any challenges from a financing perspective, Aga?
My particular instruments are non-dilutive, right? So bank debt is not a problem. I think it's more on the equity.
Yeah.
More on the equity
I
side.
think for us, we're just doing it, we had to advise them it's actually an electrical service business. It is a minority invest-owned business. And great business, growing. The issue of they wanted to acquire a whole bunch of competitors. They did a couple of acquisitions, small acquisition. They want to do a lot more. So now they're looking for an institutional investor like us, like me, to go in, and now we're going to be a shareholder, which means they will lose their MBE status because of money coming. Now, the positive is there's a whole bunch of money coming in so that they can do an acquisition every month, which is what they want to do. The negative is because, right, our money is from pension funds, endowments, and others, and it looks all the way up to who are the shareholders. You lose it, and this founder did not know whether they were winning these businesses from customers, and their customers were like Verizon, KeyBank, major, because of the status or not. And it's not worth taking the risk. So we said, look, why don't you go, if you really want to grow your business plan of where you want to go, we said, you go lose your status, certification. Take it out of all your marketing materials, because the customer's never going to tell you that, oh, we gave you business because we have to allocate a certain percentage to that. And so when they wanted to raise capital, not debt, because debt doesn't matter in terms of, but there's less you can raise than debt, right? It depends on the cash flow. Us, we're risk takers, and we're willing to put money in. And so they're going to go do that and say, prove out that they're winning businesses without that status. So there's it's hard to raise equity and keep that MBE status.
I'm only halfway through my questions, but we're up against time.
Yeah.
And this workshop is for you. So I want to leave the remainder of the workshop, any questions that you may have. I can always come back tomorrow.
What importance do you attach to IT integration, right? When you are looking at the business to acquire products?
So for us, it's helpful. We're professionals, and this is all we do. I have a team, because most founder-owned businesses, a lot of times they're in QuickBooks. They might not have that software to be able to integrate. So the very first company that we would partner with, So we say, we're going to partner with them first. We will implement immediately, get it off QuickBooks. A lot of folks are on QuickBooks. We have a team that goes in. A lot of times it's NetSuites or Great Plains. We'll put that in for them so that we're ready to do an acquisition because the ERP is set. So a lot of times we're doing it for them. It's really important because it makes integration easy. Right?
Let me change your question a bit because you focus on IT integration. IT assessment is something that I would put at the very, very top of the list because a lot of companies that we are selling, you're buying technology, you're buying their software, their business model that's built on software, and it's not that unusual where the buyer does their technology assessment, and it turns out it's not as good as it said. You know, it's got holes in it. They don't own the IP. We think they own the IP, but and so there's often, I'll just say, problems associated with doing an IP assessment. I would recommend it to anyone who's thinking about buying a technology-based company based on software.
Chris, what's up?
You guys covered really wonderful set of conventional processes that you go through. With AI being infused in everything, how is it impacting your due diligence, valuation, all the stuff that conventionally you go through?
Stop it, just repeat that a little louder.
My question was the role of AI in their business, whether it's due diligence, valuation, negotiation, sourcing.
And how does it impact how we do it, or
How you do it, how are you using it?
So this is something that's, to say, taking our industry rapidly, and it's because AI has improved so much. I want to say it's a tool, so we can now take 5 years of monthly financials in tremendous detail, put it into AI, and what we used to take an analyst an entire week. Now we can have it, and it looks great. What AI can't do is spot the issues, or spot the problems, or spot the flaws. And even our young analysts may not do it. Someone maybe with 35 years experience, they'll immediately see where the issues are. So it's going to be a terrific tool, and it helps us put pretty books together much faster. Books meaning prospectuses or what we call memorandums. But it's not going to do the real important due diligence that'll determine whether Charlie pays 5 times or 10 times for a company.
So on our side of the transaction, I think, so AI helps us compile and consolidate the quantitative analysis infinitely faster, getting us to the meaningful conversation internally infinitely faster, right? That is really important for us, but it's really the starting place. You know, down the road as AI, evolves, perhaps it starts to take over part of that conversation, which is terrifying to everybody. It should be, but at least today, it just makes us infinitely more efficient, so that we can respond to these guys when they say you have 24 hours to give us a, indication of interest on a 7 times levered transaction.
We are demanding. Only because the founders want their money back.
That's right, that's
Not my fault. I will say there is we are, again, part of it is we're a bigger firm. We're using, I agree, it's a tool. It's not at the level, but we are using the way they are using it as well, because when we get a book from these guys, brokers and advisors, we'll put it in AI, we'll summarize it, and puts a nice little thing for us to read that a 25-year-old will take like 2 days to do. But what's interesting that we've developed in-house, and because AI is, you have to teach it. So we created an AI that is, and you guys can do it too now, ChatGPT, is so that when you're buying something, you're going to say, here's why we want to buy it. Here's what's great about this business. Here's what's bad about this business. And here's why we should pay for it. So the deal team will do that. we actually make every deal team, we call it red team. So we take all the investment thesis, all the value creation that the deal team wants to do, we put it in AI, and we make it argue the opposite. So that we can actually, now, first time we did that, about 80% was terrible. Like 20% was useful. We're like, oh, we didn't think about that. In, I'd say, 6 months, it's improved because it learns. Because we feed why we think that's wrong. It's probably at about 65% of its argument for against is useful. And again, it helps us think about it. So for example, it will say, this is the leading company and it's one of only 3 in Connecticut that does it, right? AI will go, actually, let me tell you about these companies in their website says it's doing the exact same thing. And then you gotta go research and you're like, actually, no, it doesn't do the exact thing. But now it's helping you think through the opposite. So we call it AI red team. So any deal that comes in, we actually have AI argue the opposite. I actually don't think a lot of PE firms are doing it, but we've implemented that over the last 6 months. That's helpful for the senior guys too. Because normally we're the ones going like, we're poking holes, right? Now AI's poking the holes for us. We don't look like the bad guys.
Bobby, anything to add on the AI question before we close?
Yeah, I mean, it might not be quite as relevant for this group, but where we really use it day to day is on the matchmaking side. So we are a marketplace, right? We have 650 active sellers, a couple thousand active buyers, and we are ingesting quite a bit of information from all of the interactions that take place, whether it's recording phone calls, all the messages, the shared documents, and there's a lot that we can do on the back end to make sure that we are surfacing the best matches of buyers and sellers so that those conversations are taking place. So that's probably where we use it most productively, is to process all of that information we're ingesting on a daily basis. Again, not as super relevant here, but it's been incredibly helpful in making us more efficient in the matchmaking process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. I told you this panel was incredible, aren't they? To continue the conversation in the Recess Cafe, we have hors d'oeuvres and great wine. I know the wine is good. So please order for cocktails and we can continue the conversation.